Good evening. Welcome to the Sanctum Secorum reading room. Whether you're new to the literary world of Appendix N, a diehard fan of the genre, or just tuning in to see how certain titles tie into a particular set of role-playing games, we invite you to join us as we dive into the history and influence of Appendix N. We'd like to open our library to you and inspire readers to explore these new worlds. Allow me to introduce our Keepers of Mysteries for this evening. I am Keeper Jen, and with me is Keeper Bob.
Hey, everybody.
And I'd like to take this moment to remind folks who are watching live that we do have channel points on the Twitch channel here at twitch.tv/Goodman Games Official. Feel free to use those channel points for free random trivia facts, or yeah, that's probably the best thing to get from Bob. His jokes aren't always clean. We also have some giveaways coming up later in the hour, so be sure to stick around for that. And tonight we are delving into a work by none other than John Steakley. And Bob, I will let you take it away.
The planet is called Banshee. The air is unbreathable, the water is poisonous. It is home to the most implacable enemies that humanity in all of its interstellar expansion has ever encountered. Body armor has been devised for the commando forces that are to be dropped on Banshee, the culmination of 10,000 years of the armorer's craft. A trooper in this armor is a one-man atomic-powered battle fortress, but he will have to fight a nearly endless horde of berserk, hard-shelled monsters, the fighting arm of a species which uses biological technology to design perfect, mindless war minions. Felix is a scout in A-Team 2. Highly competent, he is the sole survivor of mission after mission. Yet he is a man consumed by fear and hatred, and he is protected not only by his custom-fitted body armor, but by an odd being which seems to live within him, a cold killing machine he calls the Engine. Armor is the story of humanity's war against an alien race whose foot soldiers are 3-meter-tall insects referred to as ants. It is also the story of a research colony on the fringes of human territory which is threatened by pirates. The two plots intertwine and finally join at the end, with each providing answers and insight into events of the other.
And for once, Jen did not do the audio version of this book. And I'm really happy about that, because there are some capitalized terms within the story that I would have really missed out on, I think. But Bob, I know this is one of your all-time favorites.
This is one of my all-time favorites, but before I get into that, we've already had a redemption for a random joke or random fact. So I will give a random fact that a prankster in Paris once bet his friends that he could lay down on the streets of Paris for a half hour during the busiest time of the day without being run over, and to do so safely. And he did. He drove his car, he stopped it, he popped his hood, he crawled into the car, and he remained there for half an hour. And that is currently the record for the longest length of time laid on the Paris streets, because the cops got wise to that since. Sadly, I don't remember the guy's name off the top of my head. But
that is definitely a random fact.
Bit of trivia, yes. So, John William Steakley Jr., or Steakley, I learned that late in life. It's John William Steakley Jr., born July 26, 1951, passed away November 27th, 2010, from liver disease. He published his first short story, The Blue Nose Limit, in the March 1981 issue of Amazing Stories. He published another short story in Amazing Stories that year, and he had also published 2 short stories in the Friends of the Horse Clans series.
Really?
Yes. He published 4 short stories and 2 novels. There was
That's
this
all.
one. Yep. There was this one, and there was Vampires with a $, which went on to become John Carpenter's Vampires.
And I've seen that listed on some bloggers' personal versions of Appendix N as far as gaming influence, but never this one. Um,
Yeah,
clearly, people weren't playing enough Metamorphosis Alpha. I mean, yeah, wow.
but yeah, Steakley had kicked around Hollywood. He had done a little bit of screenwriting
Yeah,
and a small amount of acting. He was there for 2 or 3 years, and he hated Hollywood with a passion. So he moved home to Texas to live out, and I quote, his childhood dream of being a science fiction author.
that's actually pretty awesome.
I think so. Yeah,
Admit it, you're jealous.
yeah. He was working on Armor 2 when he passed away.
Oh, I don't know how I would feel about a sequel to this.
Armor 2 from the so only a short sample was ever released with his permission online before he passed away, and it looked like Armor 2 was a prequel. At
I
least
could see that.
it dealt with some earlier material in the like 2 pages that were released. uh, if it bounced back and forth like the first one did, there was no indication because it was too short.
Hmm, intriguing.
But yes, so this is one of my favorite books. It is one of 2 books that I reread annually. So I guess I've read it early this year. I don't have to read it through this year, but I probably will. I might just read it twice this year.
That's really funny. What keeps bringing you back?
I absolutely love the story. I think part of the reason that I love it so much is Felix slash the engine's attitude, the angry fatalism, the combination of fatalism and denial. I'm going to die, but it's not going to be you. It's not going to be the guy behind you, and it's not going to be the guy behind him. And that attitude is just it's appealing, but also just the writing style itself. The This is not a story that glorifies war, right? I mean, it is.
That's very true. It also uses some language that I find that I've missed, if that makes sense. I mean, the book was copyright, what, 84?
That sounds right.
Yeah. Yeah, first printing is 84. And I remember a lot of the early sci-fi or I'm sorry, fantasy and horror books that I read in the late 80s, early 90s, having very similar language use. This one, the style is a little bit, I want to say overly punctuated, if that makes sense, because there would be a lot of fragments, fragmented sentences, things that wouldn't fly in normal literature or normal stories that I would edit. To be perfectly honest, it,
That's
it
totally fair.
it made it more conversational almost, but it also occurred in times when like Felix was having that dialogue with himself. So it was um, it was a very acceptable use of it, and yeah, a lot of the language I think to a handful of modules that I've read recently, and how sometimes they can always rely on the same words for descriptors. And Steakley doesn't. He reaches out there to words that actually, vocabulary that made me think. But I didn't have to look anything up. It was just one of those. I don't see that very often anymore.
Yeah, which is kind of
So I
refreshing.
appreciated that.
It is also worth noting that like I said, he released 2 novels. Both novels featured characters named Jack Crow and Felix.
It's
And
funny.
on the copyright page of Vampires, there's a quote that says, "This Jack Crow is no other Jack Crow. This Felix is no other Felix." And so that
Interesting.
always left me kind of wondering, well, were you really that hung up on the names, or are you trying to tell us something? Are you alluding to a to kind of a multiversal view of how these men's lives play out.
Oh, that's an interesting take. I did notice another thing was that so many of the character names began with an F. And in the second part where we get into Jack Crow, which is told from the first person point of view, which I usually have a little less taste for, um, a lot of those names started with a G. And it was just kind of interesting how they just kept interchanging. And then you find out that Felix's first initial is G, and everything started with either a G or an F. And honestly, it took a little bit of slow reading in that first few chapters to make sure I got everybody's names right. You know, it's a little easier in sci-fi and fantasy books when the names are completely different, even if they're bizarre, because then you can associate, just at a glance, oh, that's this person and that's this person. But this way actually made me pay more attention.
Yeah, well, and I think for those who haven't read the book, there are two stories that are told in parallel. There's the story of Felix and there's the story of Jack Crow. And in the story of Jack Crow, they have found this old suit of scout armor, and so they're mentally jacking into the armor and they are reliving Felix's memories, and so it flashes back and forth, which I think is one of the reasons why the first person perspective for Jack Crow works so well, because it really helps continue sort of the
That
delineation.
differentiation, yeah.
Right. And
Oh,
it
and
is,
Tony Hogarth has a really good point that people don't smoke that many cigarettes in novels today either.
well, that's true. And he also points out that when he's describing things, he describes them without getting into great technical detail. When he's talking about blazers and blasters, there's a difference. There's names that are kind of evocative. Move on. He doesn't have the need to break everything down for you.
No, it's told in the action what the different effects of each weapon are.
Yeah.
And it really read, especially those first few chapters, they really read like something, like I was watching a clip from Starship Troopers or something. Why did it have to be bugs?
Well, and let's talk about Starship Troopers for a minute, because I have long maintained that this out Heinlein's Heinlein when it comes to the Starship Troopers concept. I find this
Okay.
vastly superior to Heinlein's Starship Troopers, which isn't a bad book. Don't get me wrong, but I think this is much better, and with the way that it really, like I said, it doesn't glorify war. It attempts to paint a very realistic picture. This is almost like the Saving Private Ryan of Starship Trooper, style novels, in that you're in the grit, you feel the mud, you can smell the blood. It is a very gritty novel in that fashion. It's not just woohoo, I'm in a war and I'm killing folks. It really is, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. And
And
it,
then the engine takes over.
but you also see there's those moments, right, where they're getting ready to use a trooper as a bomb, and he dies and can't trigger his suit, but there's another badly injured man, and he's like, well, we're going to use you. And he's cursing Felix as he's being tossed down the hole to detonate. And it
Yeah, it it really skirts the alignment issues, I think. I mean, I
well,
want to say,
maybe there are no lawful good people in foxholes.
well, that's very, very fair. Uh, it's one of those things where you do what you got to do to accomplish the mission. But even in a role playing game, I don't know if I could do that to a fellow PC.
Oh
I'd be
yeah,
pissed if
no.
it happened to me.
But then you get into the themes. So there's some really interesting sort of background themes to war, right? About how the bureaucracy views things, and how at the end of the day, the soldiers on the field are numbers.
Mhm.
That's all they are to the people
Oh
in
yeah,
it.
because the brass doesn't know. They've never been in it. Most of them got promoted because of who their parents were or social standing. Very few of them have been in the trenches in the past, what, 30 years, and nobody knew exactly what they were up against here. And even with all of the deaths, with losing all the troops, it's like they don't care. They're just, man, we could still be better than them.
Well, in a way, they don't, and that's sort of the big picture of war, though, right? I mean, the general who isn't on the battlefield, right? I mean, once upon a time, generals rode into battle. They don't anymore. They sit back at headquarters, and so all of the forces that are going out there are just numbers. There's no linkage. There's no personal investment in the lives of the people they're sending out. It is just, I have these assets, they will accomplish this task. When you couple that with the complete ineptitude and ill preparedness
Yes.
that Felix encounters when it's supposed to be like this small abandoned fort they drop them onto, and it is instead a very, very active and populated hive, you get an idea for just how bad
Yeah.
things are.
And it
Um,
really makes me wonder if they took those readings at night because it wasn't supposed to be an active area. When the sun was out, the ants were very active. When it was dark and cold, the ants remained underground.
but,
So
but
how
the
active
ants were also
was?
intelligent too, so it
Yeah,
could
that's
very well
true.
be a case of just not
True.
exposing their forces. Uh,
Yeah, that's right, because they had mentioned that they had taken out other planets before. And I'm still curious about how that all went down. Um, did they require craft of some sort? Did we just not get to see all of that? Um,
well, and
yeah, there's a lot of possibilities there.
like later on in the book, we have they think they're winning because the ants they're seeing are misshapen and injured or old, and like, they're running out of forces, we're going to win. And it's not that they're running out of forces, it's that they were putting those out as a decoy while they were burrowing under for a massive attack from beneath. They were certainly very intelligent. um,
Yes, and always the odds.
Ghostly Squid was just talking about the survival
Mhm.
calculation. So why don't you talk a little bit about the odds, just
Oh man, you're a greener and a scout, and this is your first drop. Man, you've got maybe a 10% chance of survival. If this was your fourth drop, well, then chances are you've got closer to a 60 to 70% chance of survival. And they kept, the experienced forces kept trying to tell Felix the odds, like more than one
yeah,
occasion. Oh, so a four then. You got a 40% chance now. And
and
it's
it's
like
brutal.
Felix doesn't want to hear this, but he kind of does, and then the engine blocks it out.
Yeah,
And I
it's
think we should
that
talk
brutal
about the
feeling.
engine for a second, because
Okay.
the engine is essentially his coping mechanism, right?
Yes, yes, it is a rabid, angry coping mechanism.
It's kind of a screw the world, I'm not dying today, and he becomes a machine,
Yeah, he
seriously.
emotionally disconnects.
Um, I mean, I know that a lot of humans also have those mechanisms, but probably not to that degree. Hopefully.
Yeah, no, that is certainly true. Um, and even though when quote unquote the engine has taken over, there are still those moments that shake him so badly they kind of bring him back to himself.
Right.
Uh,
And toward the end, he's unable to tap in to the engine. The last drop that he's sent on with, was it the I keep wanting to call him the golden boy, but that's really funny
no,
because
it's you're talking about Ali, the Masao, because he talks about that's when we learn that Felix was
oh,
once the guardian archon of the planet Golden. Felix was not just a grunt. He was
Right.
he was interplanetary nobility who, when his wife died, just walked away from everything.
And no, I was referring to Kent.
Oh,
Um,
Nathan Kent is a
because
tragic figure.
he's the quote unquote golden boy, not to be confused with Felix, who is from Golden, right?
Yes. Well, and Nathan Kent is almost like he's almost like the tragic Captain America in space, right? He is never really put into any danger because he is photogenic and they use him for propaganda films. The armor they
Yeah.
give him is so overpowered that when Felix sees it in operation, he is absolutely stunned by the amount of power and energy this thing
But
has.
Felix still has to go run point for him
Well, of
and
course.
to save him. Yeah. And that
And at the end of the day,
Kent leaves him behind.
well, no, at the end of the day, Kent sacrifices himself for Felix.
Kind of.
No, no, there's no kind of about it. I mean, Kent is
Felix killed him.
blazed down so Felix can escape
Yeah.
after their second encounter, not their first.
Right. The first encounter, he left him.
First
Uh,
encounter, he cold cocked him and left him. Yeah, that was different.
yeah. Uh, yeah.
Well, I'm kind of curious. I'm kind of
I'm sorry,
curious.
but it's still very fresh in my mind since I literally got to the last page today, and uh, some of the events are in slightly different order. It feels, but I still have no love for the blue suited golden boy, and it frankly makes me think of the show The Boys a little too much.
Okay, I could see that. I could see that. Nathan Kent is Homelander. He's not. Nathan Kent isn't evil though. That's the thing.
He's not as broken. Yeah.
No, he is a tragic figure. I mean, the reason he snaps at Felix is when Felix is like, "Look, man, she loved you. She always loved you. She told me she loved you. She died in my arms." And
Mm-hmm.
confronted with that ugly truth, he snaps, and
Oh, and
that's
that was
ugly
just
to
in the
him.
showers. Yeah. that was
But
that
I
was
was going to
surprising.
say with our folks that are currently watching live, I'm curious. Those of you who read it, which was your favorite, Jack Crow or Felix? Because both really have their moments. And while we're talking about Felix a lot, Jack Crow, cutthroat space pirate, has a lot going for him as well.
I couldn't help but think of Captain Jack Harkness at certain points of this. As the ego-ridden Jack, kind of an anti-hero
Yeah,
ish.
I mean,
Yeah.
certainly Jack is he is not a heroic figure by choice in any way, shape, or form. Um, he is he
Yeah, he's got
is
the machismo that it's hard to identify with.
well, and I mean, and we have at the very beginning, and he's like, okay, well, someone's going to come after me, so I'm going to break their arm here. It's almost that Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes. Right then, they swing, I duck, come up, shatter three ribs, grab wrist, twist, and break the arm. Um, and yeah,
Yeah.
so far, I couldn't identify with Jack as a human being. Felix is a little easier to tank. Yeah, Jack is not a great guy, but again, he's not supposed to be, right. He is a criminal. He is a space pirate. He is not a heroic figure, and he sort of, as the story progresses, you can see how Felix's experiences weigh on Jack Crow's mind and,
Hmm.
and sort of changes thinking on a few things.
I was really intrigued as to why Hollis was there with the fleet as one of the brightest minds in their scientific community. And we never really got to see what he was working on until the very, very end of the story, because he became so engrossed with this suit that Jack offered as kind of a hi, I'm about to screw everyone on this planet over, but here's something fun to distract you with. And
and
you
and
can really,
what a distraction it is.
right, it almost becomes an addiction for them both. The days that they have to take off for somebody's funeral or somebody's, uh, what was it, a christening, um, they're still, okay, when can we get back to the lab? When can we keep
Well,
this going? It's almost like binging us, our favorite series or something. When
but
can
it's
we get
more
back
than
to
that.
this?
But
Because
it's more than that, though,
yes,
right? I
it's
mean, they're
definitely
living
more.
it. They're
Yes,
feeling the emotions. They're getting the adrenaline rush. I
yes, they're
mean,
feeling the terror, and they're requiring medical assistance after every plug-in. And you could really see how this strengthens their friendship too. It becomes less of a political dance, and it really forges a bond between the two characters. Well,
it's
three, I
shared
suppose.
trauma.
And so they start referring to it as before and after, because it was before Felix and after Felix.
Yeah, it's the story it tells are like now I need to ask you this because everybody knows how I feel about this book. I've made it very clear. I mean, we gave away 3 copies of it in December. What did you think of the book? Did you like the book?
I enjoyed the book. I was able to predict Felix's past after the first plugin, and I probably wouldn't reread it, but I did enjoy it, and I'm glad that I read the actual book, even though it was 400 freaking pages. Can we pick something smaller next month?
And Tony, there is a healthy relationship in the book. The ants are very loving towards one another. They're accepting. They have kind of a communal existence. They get along great.
They don't have a whole, I don't know, their teamwork kind of sucks though. They don't care if they kill one another in order to get to the humans. And we never see their queen, which leads me to believe they have less in the way of gender equality than the humans at this stage.
Well, that is true. Gender equality definitely is
I
found
was
in this book.
really floored to read something written in 1984 where, unlike Starship Troopers, there was none of that crap going on with uh
Well, don't confuse Starship Troopers the movie with Starship Troopers the book. They are very,
well,
very
yeah, it's hard not to, but there's always that, well, like, I guess so and so's, going up in rank now. Who did she
that's the movie.
like? Yeah,
And yeah, yeah,
yeah. So we don't get that in this book. It's just, oh, this is a woman. Oh, okay, cool.
yeah.
And things just move on. There's barely that pause, and I dug the conversational bits, all of the gossiping chatter from some of the other troops, and I thought it was fleshed out really nicely.
Well, and the further we get in, as we get closer towards sort of the end of Felix's story, when we're getting the revelations that he was the elected leader of Planet Golden and things like that, when we learn about Masao, which it's here it is, it's this incredibly wealthy planet. It was colonized by the Japanese, so there are still the kind of these cultural and national divisions among humanity. They're not they're they're divisions without being divisive. I guess they're
Mm-hmm.
in that Ali is there, and for troops are there. It's not an us versus them amongst humanity, but when humanity went to the stars, we went in different directions, and
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 Felix
some
and Allie
prospered.
were childhood friends.
Yeah,
So Allie was born into this position while Felix was elected.
he was elected,
Yeah.
and then he turned it away. So it was sort of like he joined the military, much like the French Foreign Legion, right? He had this past that he was trying to escape from, and as Jack Crow and everyone are watching this play out, there have been no hints at that until that moment. It's just all about who is this guy, who is this enigma that is Felix, And I mean, even the military can't honestly tell you who Felix is because they keep changing his records.
Yeah, yeah, they overused him in drops, so his records were adjusted. Um, where was that? I actually had it flagged here with the exact stats. But yeah, he had
Well,
been on his 20th drop, but they adjusted it to his 14th,
yeah,
and
because there's no way you've done 20 drops. That's just not
there's
possible.
no way you've been through 5 major medicals. Just one.
Yeah, they keep
And
changing.
that's why Holly and what was her name? Laya and Jack couldn't find a proper history on this guy. They were looking him up to try to find out where he came from, and the records have been so altered that it didn't show the full 6 months of his time there. So the first drop that they're envisioning, uh, seeing rather, through the memories retained from the suit, they're like, wait, did that really happen? It couldn't have been the first drop because he wasn't even there yet. And so I can understand that conflicting information
Yeah.
that they got.
Well, and just he when he finally is so fed up that he's laid up and he's just laying there. It's like, no, I'm not going.
Yeah,
No, I'm done. I'm not fighting your war anymore. I'm just gonna lay here. Uh,
yeah, about that.
Moments like that, or the moment when he
Because the engine obviously gave up at that point.
well, or when he's essentially the only survivor and he's laying in his bunk. And so, well, that entire area has been cleared out. So you're sending in new troops, and the troops come in and they're laughing and boisterous, and they see him and they go quiet because
Mm-hmm.
he's a veteran. And so there's that respect that he gets from the troops on the ground that he never gets from the people that are sending them out to die. And
That's a really good point. Yeah. But he refuses to answer any of them. Just a curt nod when asked if he's done this before.
yeah,
And finally, at the end, he said 20. And that sobers them all up. They're like, no, nobody survives 20. Nobody, which is like a clear death sentence now to him. And at that point, he didn't even care if he died. So the engine didn't kick in.
yeah. Well, and he was just he had come to a point where he was so miserable and with everything going on he didn't care anymore. I think it wasn't that the engine didn't kick in so much as while consciously he was declaring his will to live on a subconscious level, he had sort of just given up on that.
Yeah.
I think he had come to the point where he wanted to die, and he was playing out that argument and using the engine as his scapegoat. I mean, at the end of the day, it's one man's determination over everything else. That is what has kept
Mm-hmm.
him going, is just sheer stubbornness.
I will also say that besides the obvious Heinlein influence here, I also got a lot of Gardner Fox in that single determination to survive, that singular human in this weird place. And I really, especially once we start getting into the building of the bunker, I really started getting a Margaret St. Clair vibe off of it.
Oh, really?
From that and from the lab scenes that Jack was in. Yeah, it just sign of the laborers especially.
Yeah, I could see I could see some Sign of the Laborous parallels, and certainly I can see comparisons to Gardner Fox. I mean, besides Gardner Fox's novels, there was all of his comic book work as well, and this story I think plays out in a very visceral and visual fashion.
Arena, yeah.
And so it certainly kind of ties together that way. Um,
I'm really curious about that prequel because there was a comment made, oh, are you from Earth? Don't tell me you're still salty about that South America deal. What went down in South America? I need to know now.
Well,
Uh,
it's just these things, right? Well, and I did post the link to the Armor 2 sampler. I dropped that into the chat so that folks can check it out. I mean, again, it's
might
if
want
I
to
recall
repost that
correctly,
for our new additions.
yeah, if I recall, it's maybe 2 pages because it was done as a sampler of the work in progress. He was a lot further along, but it was never finished, and I think there was only very brief discussion about someone else finishing it, and it never was.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it is, and yet it isn't, right? I mean, this is, like I said, this is one of 2 books I read every year. This is one of my favorite books of all time.
Can't leave something like, what happened in South America just
Well,
dangling
no,
out there for
no.
me.
My fear is that there's a sequel, and it doesn't come close to living up to the first.
It could be just too tropey.
Well, it could just be, it could be okay. Vampires isn't a bad book. It to me, it doesn't. I don't read that book every year, so I fear I always feared that had it come out, I would have read it regardless. But I wonder if I would have been disappointed because there is just so much wonderfully targeted commentary about war, about governments, that I don't know if it really needed a sequel other than commercially.
Fair enough.
So,
That's a really nice summation, Bob. So I don't know as we can. I mean, we could probably go into all the nitty gritty, but it's actually a good read. As you can tell, I found a few things to mark here. Uh, again, roughly 400 pages, but a good solid read, and it's not part of a series, which is kind of a bonus at this stage
well, and I
with
don't
everything
think
else we've got to read, right?
anybody in the chat has expressed a dislike for the book either. Uh, I, it's one of those things. When I worked in a bookstore, and I was running the science fiction and fantasy section, I always kept 2 face outs of this book because people would ask what I'd recommend, and I would recommend this book. They would take it, they would read it, they'd come back to like, yeah, that was great. What's next? I'm like, well, you only wrote one other, and it wasn't science fiction. Um, so we're going to move on to something else now, but at least you got to read this piece of work.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's still, like I said, it's still in print. We gave out 3 copies in December.
That's true. There are a number of different printings and covers and
It's
publishers.
available on audio. It is out there, and it is going to stay out there for a very long time.
And the audio was not bad. In fact, I could actually see re-listening or listening to it now. I tried at first before reading the book, but it just wasn't pulling me right off the bat. I wasn't getting into it. And I realize now, like I said, with some of the capitalized terms for their technology, I'm glad I read it first, so now I could re-listen to it as a little production in the background or something and enjoy it while I have a grasp of what's going on already.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Um, I mean, I had read the book more than 20 times before I'd ever discovered an audio. So for me, that wasn't an issue, right? I mean, this is
Yeah.
this is a book I know so well, but yeah.
The history prof would like to know if there's a movie version. No, I believe is the answer we're looking for.
But it certainly would make for a good movie, I think. Well, if done right. I mean,
That's true. That's
you look at
true.
Starship Troopers and look at the movie from Starship Troopers, and you get the idea why it might be worth fearing a film adaptation of Armor.
Fair enough.
But again, this Jack Crow is no other Jack Crow. This Felix is no other Felix. So yeah, I love the book. I wholly recommend it, and it draws on, it draws on Heinlein. You can feel uh, the influence of a little bit of Asimov and some of his attitudes in there. Heinlein's attitudes towards war and equality certainly play through as well. But
And
it's
like I
just
said, I got a heavy Gardner Fox vibe off of it too. Okay, there's a lot going on with Sanctum in the coming months, so I should probably
yeah,
let
maybe.
folks know about this
I,
before we run out of time in our slot here, because our Twitch mistress does have other things to do with her week. Thank you, Elena, as always. Uh, Sanctum Media, in partnership with Ugandan game designer Ashraf Braden, have released our second in a new line of DCC items. Luquata, a lake monster that plagued fishermen on Lake Victoria, uh, is available on Drive-Through RPG for a mere $1. Included with this release are the rules for 3 weapons, a full pronunciation guide, 3 of those technically, and audio pronunciations are also included with this download, as well as a mighty deed of arms, which would be the dismembering attack. That'll be fun to throw at your judges during your next game, guys. I promise.
Yeah, so a lake monster, 3 weapons, and a new mighty deed for a
For a
dollar.
buck. Uh, Important to note is that all of Sanctum proceeds, after drive-through RPG fees and whatnot, go directly to Ashraf Braden, the primary creator. This is Ashraf's second RPG release, and the monthly releases will be continuing in the foreseeable future. He's also going to be contributing to Sanctum Secorum quarterly, and uh, in for those of you just tuning in or finding us after some long hiatus, instead of doing a episode companion, we're doing a quarterly zine for you, and that will kind of tie in everything that we've discussed on Sanctum Secorum Reading Room, as well as the Sanctum Secorum podcast, which is on the second Tuesday of every month now. And if it helps make up your mind about getting this $1 zine feature, for lack of better words, uh, life in Uganda is very, very different from ours. And to put it in perspective, the last disbursement of $25 paid Ashraf's rent for a month. So you're really, really helping
We have discovered
inspire
we have
a new
discovered
creator.
we've discovered the true way to make a living as a game designer is live in rural Uganda. It's tough there.
I'm a little torn on that one, Bob.
it's not like things aren't tough all over, right? It's just that the economics of things are very different. A daily wage in rural Uganda is $2.70. So Ashraf is actually doing well with these publications and is continuing to do so. He's already in talks with someone else outside of the Sanctum Secorum family
Yeah.
to do a full-blown zine of work. So he is
Within our
expanding.
within the DCC third party
Yes,
community.
within the DCC community. So he is growing and expanding. We already have the third release is coming up. Is he going to do a module? Eventually, we are going to do a module, but he has had the PDF of the DCC core book for a couple months now, and
Keep
so
in mind that when he submits writings to us, they have been composed on a smartphone.
he writes them out longhand and then he types them into his phone to send the manuscripts. So for larger things like a module, it'll probably be photographs of manuscripts. But he's working on a series of Ugandan spirits for Sanctum Secorum Quarterly, and he's already begun a much larger piece on Ugandan witchcraft cults, which will
Oh,
be for a
yay!
larger separate zine project down the road that he's.
That is so awesome. And he brings such a unique view to it that you know how much I love this community. I love all of you. None of you can bring that history, that personal history into it, and that specific point of view with the different cultural aspects. And I just love that sort of immersion.
Well,
So
and it's
with
new
that,
material by a new voice.
yes, exactly. Yes. Um, hashtag not a cult, right?
Hashtag definitely a cult, just not a doomsday cult.
That's true. There's no
Oh, I guess
Kool-Aid here,
MCC
just
might be a
lattes.
doomsday cult. Anyway,
With that, it is time once again. Elena, hit us up. We need to announce a winner along with a pair of giveaways. One for our live audience and the other for all of our viewers and listeners. That's right. It is time to enter the Sanctum Secorum's very own
Prize Closet
yes.
of
So let's start with
Mystery.
announcing the winner of last month's final giveaway, which is a trio of Daw Yellow Spine books going to Brian Azevedo. I'm hoping I'm getting that right, Azevedo. We will be sending that prize package out in the mail to you tomorrow. But yeah, so there's that. And then moving on, we come to tonight's live giveaway. As a reminder, everyone watching the show live is eligible for both the live giveaway and our monthly drawing. But tonight's first prize is a copy of Gods and Golems by Lester Del Rey, which is a wonderful collection of like 4 or 5 science fiction-ish themed stories. Some are very space opera, some are really down to earth.
I haven't picked that up in a long time, but I really liked Lester Del Rey.
It is a great book. As a matter of fact, I took a copy of it with us when we went out to the Vance last month, and rereading it, really enjoyed it. So that is going to go to the live viewer who can first correctly give the answer to the following question. While the original Appendix N is the best known of the TSR created lists of inspirational reading, there have been other lists provided by the creators of Dungeons & Dragons. These additional lists also included nonfiction among their recommendations. Which of the following is not a recommendation found in the Moldave Basic D&D set?
Ooh.
A. Hero Tales from Many Lands by Alice Hazeltine. B. Adventures with the Giants by Catherine F. Sello. C. The Book of Imaginary Beings by Jorge Luis Borges. Or D. Giants, Monsters, and Dragons, an Encyclopedia of Folklore by Carol Rose. Okay, so
the history prof jumped the gun with B before you even asked the question.
And he is sticking with B. Adventures with the Giants by Catherine F. Sello, unfortunately, is one of the recommendations found in the Moldave Basic.
So these are nonfiction works.
These are nonfiction.
In addition to Appendix N.
Correct. 3 of these are recommended. One of them is not. So we've had
as for the Moldave Basic set. Interesting.
I think there's silence because people are going for their Moldave sets, but you can just guess.
It's A, C, or D at this point.
Yep. Ghostly Squid Zero, Giants, Monsters, and Dragons, an Encyclopedia of Folklore by Carol Rose, was released in 2001, which was long after the Moldave Basic D&D set, and that is indeed the correct answer. So Ghostly Squid, you will be getting a copy of Gods and Golems by Lester Del Rey. I like that. The answer's out. Sleepy Fingers, living up to the sleepy part, comes in with C.
Nice. Okay, next time it'll be B. I don't know. Maybe out of spite, we're going to.
I think it was B last month. Now, if you're watching the show and didn't win the trivia question, or you're listening to a replay, listening to the podcast, you can still enter to win our monthly drawing by dropping an email to thehub@sanctum.media with your name. Entries should have the subject line, Prize Closet of Mystery. And this month's prize is another book by Lester Del Rey. It is Nerves by Lester Del Rey.
Novel length, okay.
So, yes.
And so our next show is going to be March 28th. And our live viewers are going to help us choose what we're going to read for it. Before we go too terribly far, I just want to remind everyone that March 14th is the next episode of the Sanctum Secorum podcast, where we also have Keeper Mark with us. We have a very special guest coming on with us to discuss, was it the Jewels of the Elephant?
No, the Tower of the Elephant. And that very special guest is...
Tower of the Elephant. I didn't know if you wanted to mention that.
Oh my goodness, yes. Joseph Goodman of Goodman Games will be joining the Sanctum Secorum for the 50th regular episode of our show. I think that is certainly worth mentioning, and we will be discussing his chosen story, his favorite Appendix N story, Tower of the Elephant by Robert E. Howard.
So that will be in 2 weeks. In 4 weeks, meet us back here, same time, same channel, and
let's figure out what we're going to read.
Yeah, we've got our choice of The Broken Sword by Poul Anderson. We could do the second Book of Swords by Fred Saberhagen, since we liked the first one so much.
Yeah.
We could do The Face in the Frost by John Bellairs, always a classic. Or, oh, I see Red Nails has been added to the list by Robert E. Howard. So that will be up as a poll here in Twitch. As soon as Elena hits the button. There we go. So you can hit the drop down button to view your choices here.
Oh, the second Book of Swords is off to an early lead.
And you can also use channel points to increase your vote. It costs 300 channel points. You can weigh your votes. And I'm not proud. I'll do it.
Well,
we almost had a good split there until people started weighing their votes. I like it.
I think all of them are good choices, right? I mean, there's not a bad choice in there, but
no. Yeah,
the second Book of Swords is certainly out in front. Red Nails. Robert E. Howard. Robert E. Howard is nearly caught up to Saberhagen. Howard passed Saberhagen. It's Saberhagen and Howard down to the wire. Saberhagen, Howard. It is Howard. We are reading Red Nails by Robert E. Howard.
56% majority, which means we contribute. Oh, Ghosty Squid contributed 4,200 channel points. I love it. I mean, I think we were all hitting that button because with all of these podcasts, we generate all of these channel points depending on how long we sit in each show or each Twitch channel. So, yeah, I still have 28,000 channel points. I should have weighed that vote more, right? No, I kid. Red Nails, yes.
It is. The Sanctum poll has been compared to a Chicago election, and I think that is a fairly fair comparison. Vote early, vote
often. Yes. I think we all have way too many channel points. We need to start redeeming those on other shows. Like, I believe Chris Arneson is our Monday night artist who we can redeem, jokes and facts. And when Brad McDevitt's on, we can do it with him as well. I encourage you to hit up all of the Twitch shows that are here.
We've had another redemption for a random joke or fact. Unless Jen wants to do a joke, I'm going to do a fact.
What'd you say? Do you want to do a joke?
Well, you do jokes, I do facts. That's just the way of it.
My jokes are horrible.
My jokes aren't suitable for air. So that will take us back to random facts. Okay. I've got a great random fact. I've got a personal random How about this?
Oh,
So,
and I can answer an actual question after this.
so when I met Jen,
Oh boy.
Jen was singing with an Irish traditional group called Ishkabaha. Ishkabaha, of course, being what Americans would call whiskey. It's the water of life, but it's what we call whiskey. They were a quintet. I am the Irishman who married a fifth of whiskey. There is a very random fact for you.
That is quite random. And as for why Appendix N is called Appendix N, well, you have Appendix A, Appendix B, Appendix C.
It was literally,
and that is literally where it falls, particularly in the AD&D DMG.
yes, in the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, Appendix N was Gary's list. I don't even remember what the other appendices were at this point. N is pretty much the only one that I remember.
There is the equivalent in the DCC book.
Yes, there is.
So if you check it out, there's you know, the creators' choices in there, like Joseph Goodman, Doug Kovacs, Harley Strode, the main three that are credited with creating this book. They all contributed to the Appendix N there as well.
Well, and it's really interesting when you look at Appendix N as a whole, and you then look beyond. You start looking at the other lists that TSR put together. I mean, Bullfinch's mythology is in there. Lloyd Alexander's Prydain series is mentioned in the Molde book. In the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide, there is an Appendix N, and they expand on it. Some authors who originally just listed by name now have book selections. It is a wonderful listing of inspirational materials, and in the case of the Mole, there's also just a long list of additional authors like Catherine Kurtz and others who were very influential to him at the time as he was preparing that set. So it is, while Appendix N itself, the purity of Appendix N is a simple list, the inspirational materials have been added to by all number of folks over the years, and there's some great stuff in there. And for inspiration.
Yeah, really. And the DCC book, there's a nice big 2-page spread on what makes it Appendix N and what makes DCC, with the actual list of inspirational reading on the following page. And I really, really dig the fact that Goodman follows it up with Appendix O for OSR resources. And that includes events and podcasts and third-party publishers and community forums and websites. And it's, yeah, it really, I just love the way this community is fostered is all.
But that's what we do here, right? We talk about Appendix N. We've talked about its predecessors. We talk about some of the things that is spawned. There are so many great authors who have inspired and taken inspiration from one another, and this is just another wonderful case. And now, next month we're going to be talking about the granddaddy, the author for whom the term sword and sorcery was coined. So we will see.
Not by whom, but for whom.
For whom, that's what I said. So we will see you all next month, March 28th, when we discuss Robert E. Howard's Red Nails.
Have a great night, everyone.
Be inspired.